Oh, beloveds, this is the season where the seeds I pressed into tiny peat pods all around my house are getting bigger, and they're demanding more of my attention every day. The winds of late winter are dying down, and soon it will be time to tuck new life into earth around my home. This is actually just my second year of a growing season after moving all the way across the country, and I'm aware of how much I still have to learn, right, about the land where I now find myself at home. And so I was just before I came here pressing those pods into larger pots and transferring their labels and snugging them up under grow lights. And it made me mindful of how often choice is removed from the blessing of growing things, right? Of how food and farming are too often linked to violence or displacement, and how our partners in the work of migrant justice and climate justice might feel the weight of planting something as small as a seed. It's my profound privilege, as I just told you, to play a small part in the ongoing work of our UU Service Committee and all that we do to foster human rights around the globe. And we regularly discuss the work of our partners who are organizing for justice for migrants, justice for Earth itself, justice in a range of crisis moments that impact our very survival as a human family. And we follow the leadership of our frontline communities. I'm sure you've heard this in your own organizing work, right? Those most directly impacted by whatever threatens our well-being, and we do our best to provide the types of resources that are most needed to support those leaders in their work for change. Everything we do is in service of the dignity and power of all peoples, and I'm reminded of how very humanizing it is to labor for the rights of all. Now, one of the oldest questions we ask ourselves in religious community is, what does it mean to be human? Have you chatted about this at parties lately? But it's an old question. What does it mean to be human? How do we know ourselves in the world? Right? What calls us into being, and how do we understand the purpose of our living? I'm reminded of those questions every time my colleague, the Reverend Deanna Vandiver, talks about what it means to human and humane together. Reverend Deanna is our Director of Justice Education at UUSC, and she manages our College of Social Justice. If you've gone on any service learning trips or done some of those workshops, you will encounter the college. Their work is to inspire and sustain spiritually grounded activism for justice. So essentially, their goal is to help us, human and humane, together. Now, I know the language of human rights, it brings to mind these powerful proclamations from mighty institutions, right? We think of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights from the United Nations in 1948. I'll be honest, the language of human rights sometimes reminds me of old philosophy classes, right? Where the expression of values in such idealized language sometimes feels like it might have no bearing at all on actual people's lived realities, right? In those moments, I want tangible reminders. I want someone to tell me how everything we value in our living is at stake moment to moment around the world. I think each of us can bring to mind basic rights that we believe everyone deserves. Right? What do you want for your loved ones, your neighbor, even those you don't particularly like? What do we deserve? Right? And then there's stories from our own cultures, our histories, or our personal lived experiences where those rights horribly are threatened. So I'm talking about the big things, like the right to live free from slavery, to be treated equal in society. We say we have the right to marry, to have families, to express what we believe. Education is a right. So is work. So is clean air, access to clean water. So are the safety and protection of our children. I feel like I need to say that again in these days, the safety and protection of our children. So is asylum in another country if you're facing persecution in your own. And each of these, and so many more, are routinely threatened, not just somewhere else, but right here, in our neighborhoods, here for members of this beloved community. My theological grappling with what it means to be human wants reminders of joy and praise. I want shared meals and cold glasses of water drawn directly from the earth. That wrestling helps me make decisions about love and family and migration and fossil fuels, right? Based on the babies I've had the privilege of holding in my arms, but also the children whom I will never know, but whose promise I believe in fiercely. And it revels in the words of our poet this morning, Naomi Shihab Nye, who reminds us of madres y milagros, mothers and miracles, while describing a lush garden near a military settlement on the West Bank. Naomi Shihab Nye is a Palestinian-American poet whose father was a Palestinian refugee. She was born in Ferguson, Missouri, and raised in Palestine and Ferguson both, and she's been shaped by the histories and the experiences of struggle in both places. And I appreciate how she speaks directly to injustice in her writings while still holding the humanity of everyone at her center. Right, when she writes of Palestine, Jerusalem, or the West Bank, she unflinchingly describes injustice for us while holding both Israeli and Palestinian peoples as holy and whole in her writings. The struggles of two communities with profound histories of persecution is described through the interactions of neighbors who, as often as not, love one another. Her imagery has haunted me in these past few weeks as bombs fell again in this troubled, deeply troubled region. Now, this doesn't mean that Nye isn't arguing for the rights of her people. Of course she is. Of course she is. But it means she holds a view wide enough to hold on to the rights of everyone. And it matters. It matters that we encounter the Garden of Abu Mahmoud in descriptions of the West Bank. How many of you would instinctively have thought or understood why her friend, when hearing that her parents chose to raise her in Ferguson and then Palestine, would respond, "Wow, your parents really picked the garden spots"? When I hear those two place names, I think of police brutality and occupation. Right? I think of genocide and government-sanctioned violence, and I forget about eggplants and peaches or the sweet taste of mint. I need that reminder that the blessings of life continue even in unspeakable moments. That when we reach out in partnership with those laboring for the benefit of their own communities and countries, we're not only fighting for some catalog of human rights on a list at the United Nations. Right? We are investing in what it means to somebody else live a fully human life. And this is how I begin to know my own humanity. It's how I'm willingly vulnerable to how precious that is and how devastating it can be when we turn to one another with hatred to violate that very humanity that we know, that we teach, is sacred in every person. I'm a seminary professor most of the time. I'm supposed to know what I believe about what it means to be human, right? This knowing, this stretching, then asking, then knowing again, and thinking you know for a while, it's all part of a spiritual journey that invites us to question again and again. And in these years of COVID, of unequal access to life-saving treatments and vaccines around the globe, they have me questioning again, what does it mean to be human? You know, at the UUSC, we have protocols like everyone does, mindful protocols, but we can't have them for our partners because the majority of our partners still cannot access their first vaccine. So when we meet with them, we meet them as they are. And these times have me asking, how much am I willing and able to give of myself while our nation is in immense ideological struggle, right? And the very values we hold most dear are being debated in the halls of government. What does it mean to be human? How is that impacted when we seek to control another person's gender or their right to reproductive freedom? What does it mean to be human when we take away someone's right to vote? What is asked of us? And how much can we actually give? Right? Perhaps more urgently, how do I stay actively committed to my values in a world when I have gotten so very tired? Tired, when all of us are struggling with the long-term impacts, right, of this communal trauma. I know we get weary. Beloveds, we get so weary, legitimately weary. And in those moments, I think we try to tell ourselves to do better, right? Some version of self-judgment that rarely, if we're honest, helps us to help other people, especially people we don't know. So in those moments, if I may, I want to invite you to turn instead to what it means to human and humane together. To know that near a military encampment on the West Bank, there are trees so well loved that their branches need to be held up to support all the fruit. I want us to share the gleanings of others' languages so that our mouths might be filled with praise. I want us to love hillsides near our own homes so much that no inch of those slopes goes unsung. I believe our humanity is grounded in the goodness of what can be in this life, and that it grows in response to the simple belief that together we can contribute to the well-being of all. The tides of violence and uncertainty, illness and strife constantly offer us this lie. It's a lie that we live separate from one another and in a state of constant competition. That there will never be enough, that we can never be enough, that it's not even worth trying. But our organizers and activists, may they be forever blessed, work tirelessly to remind us that our greatest power manifests through our connections to one another and the disruptions of patterns that discourage us from belief in our own wholeness. For over 80 years, UUSC has centered that belief we've been talking about, that all people have inherent power and dignity in their work to advance human rights and social justice around the globe. And we do that in a way that's partner-led, right? Meaning that those who work to confront unjust power structures and mobilize to challenge oppressive policies in their own communities decide how to shape the world for themselves. The wide range of support that UUSC offers our partners through research, education, strategic media communication, and advising, all of this in addition to financial grants. This allows partners to prioritize what is most needed in their own communities, rather than reshaping themselves somehow to match grant requirements just in order to secure funding. We see this all the time, right? It is so rare in the world of justice making to allow the voices of those who know best how to emphasize the wholeness and value of their own communities to do so, rather than being turned into some kind of inspiration story to convince us to give. Right? It's rare that we remind one another of our humanity in the work for human rights. But I believe that this investment, right, in communities outside our own is how we know ourselves to be human, holy, and whole. And it's not about charity. It is never about charity, right? And it's not remotely about knowing the best way forward ourselves. That's the point. It is instead about trusting in our beloved's own knowing and experiencing our gratitude and praise that we are invited to be part of their solution. It matters to me that our faith tradition encourages us to draw on the love at the heart of our Universalist teachings as a catalyzing fuel for change in the world. Unitarian Universalism encourages us to compassionate, but I would add informed generosity, right? It challenges us to foster relationships of mutuality, in essence, to know that we cannot fully understand our purpose in this life without connections born of love, curiosity, and respect. We're not meant to be quiet about our values. Instead, we are asked to be the change we see in the world. I know you've heard that, or better, to be the change we are and can be in the world. This is the work of faithfulness. This is love made manifest by a justice-seeking people. I cannot thank you enough for your support of our UU Service Committee. This beloved institution carries a legacy of justice-making through both our Unitarian and Universalist forebears that takes us all the way back to responding to human rights violations that led to World War II, sometimes at great personal risk. Those same violations that led to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, this legacy reminds us that the value of our efforts bears fruit in each generation, and it will do so for generations to come. We have everything we need to make a difference against the tides of injustice around the globe, and no amount of weariness or collective exhaustion separate us from what we know of our own humanity. Do not despair, beloveds. Do what you can. Do what you feel you must, trusting that the other members of this faith community and our tradition as a whole are also doing their part. Collectively, we are stronger than we know, and together we will carry this powerful legacy forward.